What is up, everyone? JD here. I hope you're all doing well today. Today, I'm excited to bring you another everyday carry video. We are going to review the Spyderco Shaman. This particular knife has a 3.61 inch S30V coated blade with 4.71 inch G10 handles with a total length of 8.31 inches, and Spyderco claims this comes in at 5.24 ounces. So we'll go ahead and give that a quick little verification. Let's go ahead and get the scale out here, close it up, and see what that comes in at. So 5.2 ounces. So it's always nice to see that it does match what the manufacturer is saying. I know that there's different iterations and different variants that could cause that to fluctuate depending on which one you're getting. What I'd like to do before we go ahead and get into this particular knife, I'd like to go ahead and do my typical comparisons. First up, I'm going to bring out the Spyderco Paramilitary 2. I'm going to bring these down just a tiny bit there. The Paramilitary 2 has a 3.44 inch S45 VN blade steel with a 4.81 inch G10 handle and weighing in at a lightweight 3.75 ounces. The next knife I'd like to bring out here, the Spyderco Yojimbo 2. The Yojimbo comes with a 3.125 inch S20V coated blade steel, 4.5 inch G10 scales for an overall length of 7.5 inches. The Yojimbo 2 comes in at a lightweight 4 ounces. So very good comparisons. You can see the Shaman's kind of sitting closer to the Paramilitary 2 as far as footprint and size, as opposed to the Yojimbo, which is slightly smaller. Let me go ahead and get these guys out of the way for the moment, and I want to go ahead and bring in two other comparison knives, and those are going to be my crossbar locks comparisons. First up is going to be the Benchmade Bug Out. The Benchmade Bug Out comes with a 3.24 inch S30V blade, 4.22 inch Titanium G10 scales for an overall length of 7.46 inches and weighing in at a very lightweight, feathery lightweight, ultra lightweight actually, 2.3 ounces. You can see here the Shaman is definitely a lot bigger than the Bug Out. Let me go ahead and bring out the other crossbar lock comparison that I like to do, and that is going to be the Sig K320 by Hogue. This is going to be a very interesting comparison knife in my opinion. It has a 3.5 inch S30V blade steel coated here as well, 4.5 inch polymer handles for an overall length of 8 inches and a very lightweight 4.16 ounces. So it is a little bit smaller. The K320 is a little bit smaller overall than the Shaman, but they have very similar ergos going for them. So I think this is going to be a knife that's going to come back out in a little bit for a further discussion around comparisons. I apologize, guys. Don't know what's going on with me today. The next two knives are going to be my budget realm knives. A very well-known EDC knife is going to be the Civivi Elementum. The Elementum has a 2.96 inch D2 steel, 4.03 inches on the handles with micarta scales in this instance, for an overall length of 6.99 inches and a very lightweight, ultra lightweight, 2.89 ounces. The next knife in the budget realm is going to be the CJ RB Feldspar. This one has a 3.5 inch stonewash D2 steel blade with 4.6 inch micarta handles, burlap micarta in this instance, and an overall length of 8.1 inches. The weight coming in at 3.67 ounces, so these are two very good comparisons if you're more familiar with the budget realm. Let me go ahead and do some profile comparisons so you get an idea of footprint and how they're going to ride in the pocket as far as thickness goes. So we'll go ahead and start out with the Elementum. As you can see here, the Shaman is a very thin knife for being a full-size knife. It's very close to the Elementum, even though the Elementum is slightly thinner, and then it's going to be even with the Feldspar, which is pretty much what I thought. I'm going to jump over to the Spydercos because I want to get to that K320 and do the profile and discuss. So you can see here the Yojimbo is slightly thinner, and the Paramilitary 2 with the Titanium crossfade scales, because they're contoured, is a little bit thicker. The bug out is going to be thinner. It's always thinner than anything in the comparison realm. In the K320, gonna seem like it's thicker. Again, I talk about this in the comparison. That is because it is contoured to ramp up. So I'll have to do this from the top a little. I probably should switch hands. But as you can see here, it starts out thinner, and then as you progress up the V-shaped handle, it does end up getting thicker. Let me go ahead and do my thoughts, and then we'll talk about knives that closely compare to the Shaman. The Shaman has a very heavy detent. And what that equates to, it does keep the blade secure in there, but it's a very satisfying detent, and you get a very satisfying thwack when you deploy. And what I have learned is with the jimping on the front here, you can actually front flip this knife. Can you believe that? I didn't know that until I got it in hand, started playing around with it, and I kind of started wondering, and I think I even saw out there somebody talk about the fact that you can front flip, even though that's not what it's intended for. It's really meant for the jimping and the ergos. While we're talking about the ergos, let me get into that. It feels really good in hand, and I really love the hand position that you get when you're using it behind the finger ramp here. This finger choil is nice in the fact that you can use it to kind of choke up, use it through your push throughs. You can come back, and when you're trying to do some more precise work and you move up on the blade, it's nice to get up on the blade. But in all honesty, I think this is the one area that the Shaman really lets me down. I think I would have actually preferred that they just carry this all the way to the tip and just eliminate that finger choil, because you have plenty of grip back here. I would have liked the blade to come up to about where it stops right here, for them to give me a sharpening choil, and just to have this ramp come up so that you can be up on where the blade would normally stop. I think this is a little bit of a waste in my opinion, and I was a bit let down as I continued to use and handle the knife, because I feel like you have all this excess in the back. The finger guard on here doesn't really work for me like I would have hoped, because when you look at the PM2, even when you come back here on the actual handle, when you get your thumb in position, you still end up being much closer to the actual blade than you do on the Shaman. So if you take a look at where your finger stops here, you see what I'm saying? The Shaman, because of its overall mass, girthy size, you end up being further back from the blade if you just want to use the G10 handles for the knife. So I was a little bit disappointed in that regard. Otherwise, like I said, they did a really good job. They put really nice jimping on the actual finger choil, and they did nice jimping here where you want to put your thumb, and if you want to kind of grip up, it does grab onto the webbing of your finger and allows you to get really far up for those push through cuts. Now, I actually try to put the nose down on a drop point and a clip point to keep that from sliding out, trying to kind of feed whatever it is that I'm cutting through or breaking down into the blade. So it does a really good job in that regard, but I have found like when you try to do that out here, it actually makes you move your finger up there, and I just feel like it's kind of awkward. Outside of that, the phosphor bond washers, really good action. I can't complain about it. The only other thing that I think that I will nitpick on this particular knife, since Spyderco continues to want to raise the price on this, it seems, is that little hump right there, when you actually go to close the knife, it actually comes in and it'll hit your finger as you're closing it. So I just feel like they kind of missed a couple of opportunities here with this, and Spyderco is really not the type that's going to change their knives, and I'm disappointed in that regard. Like I said, I do like it in some points, but I feel like I'd rather have more cutting surface and more blade surface. Just move it up, get rid of the finger choil, and bring the blade back. And I'm not going to keep beating that drum. I just wanted to touch on that. So let me move over to some knives that I think kind of compare favorably to a comparison for this knife. I'm not going to throw any more specs out, but I did want to talk about some of these knives. So one of them that I want to go over first actually is in Spyderco's current lineup, and that's the Manix 2. If you take a look at these knives, again, the Manix 2 does a really good job. If you look at where the pivot is, you can see that that finger cutout, or finger guard, if you want to call it that, is further up on the pivot than it is with the Shaman. So you end up, oops, I'm sorry there. You end up being closer to the cutting edge with this grip. And it does, you know, when you talk about the compression lock versus the cage ball or ball cage lock, they're both very strong locks. The footprint, very favorable. These both have coated S30V blades. Wrong side, Jorge. So very similar material. They both have very beefy spines. Granted, the Shaman is more beefy, but I think the Manix 2 is probably overlooked for its thickness, and the fact that this is probably, being that it's that leaf shape, going to be a really good hard use knife. Now, the tips on these both come to a very fine tip. You do have a bit more tip to potentially worry about, but if you're not prying with your knife, which I don't use that, I have a pry bar to try to pry, so I really don't worry about the tip on the Manix 2 that much. They both give really good choke up points if you do need to move up, but again, when you move back, you're closer to the cutting surface on the Manix 2 than you are on the Shaman. You're much further back in that neutral position than you are with the Manix 2. The other thing that I think is very interesting is the fact that you get really grippy G10 texturing on the Manix 2, and you get a very toned down jimping on the G10 with the actual Shaman. So that's very interesting. They're both like a heavier hard use knife, and I really think the Manix is overlooked, and the fact that it to me is a competitive knife and a compelling argument in this category, because you get G10 and G10, ball cage lock, compression lock, both keep the fingers out of the blade path. S30V blade steel, you get a little bit more S30V blade steel with the thicker Shaman, but you're coming like $60 less for the Manix 2. And I think, to me, for the value, I probably would lean towards the Manix 2, especially if you do like the upgrade to the Flytanium ball cage lock and it adds that jimping in. I just really like that lock. And I think, you know, it's a really strong lock that's overlooked inside of Spyderco's own lineup. And the other knife I'm going to go ahead and bring back out here is going to be the Sig K320. I think this compares really well, and I think that Sig and Hogue, well, you know, Hogue made the knife, but I think Hogue did a really good job. Again, that finger guard is more in line with the pivot, almost even with the pivot, than it is on the Shaman. And that allows you to, again, be much closer to the cutting edge than it does on the Shaman. You are almost directly on top of it when you put your thumb in and you think about your cutting surface. And it still gives you that finger guard, and it's not sharp on this back side. So when your knuckle is in there, you're actually, and I'm trying to get it in there so you can see, you're actually not touching any of the sharpening surface. Now, when it comes to sharpening, I think a sharpening choil is better suited than the finger guard. But again, I think these are meant for folks that are probably going to have on gloves and trying to use this for heavy duty, hard use. And I think the ergos on these are really outstanding. Now, because this is polymer, people are probably going to turn their nose up because they're going to think it's not a premium material. But if you are someone that also happens to carry firearms, you probably are aware of the fact that the polymer that they used on pistols, or that they use on pistols, are very strong, tough materials that are meant to be used and abused, that they are very lightweight. And that's part of the reason why I think that Sig wanted to put this on there, is to complement one of their pistols that has this type of grip on there. It's really super comfortable in hand. And for a work knife, if you really don't care or aren't bothered by the materials, which I know no knife enthusiast is going to say that they don't care about that, the polymer is going to be a turnoff for them. But I mean, really, for a knife that's like $100, like it's like 120, you can get them on sale now for around that price because it's during the holidays. This is fantastic value for a knife that's going to be a user. And the other thing that I'll mention is that all of these do a surprisingly good job of staying thin behind the edge for a thick blade, making them really compelling slicers, even though they're probably not going to be the most slicey knife out there. Having said that, the K320 also gives you a swedge, so you're going to have less resistance as you come out onto the cutting surface to cut through things. So less drag, helping it make it feel a little bit more slicey. Let me go ahead and close these up because I wanted you to see how they all kind of compare as far as thickness for the width. The Shaman is on that factory clip. It's not going to really sit too well. So you can kind of see here that the Manix 2 and the Shaman compare pretty favorably. They did a good job of keeping that down for that leaf shape, but still giving you really good grip and texture. And the Shaman is just going to be right even with it. I know the Shaman and the K320 probably don't look like they'd be even when you move them up there, but they're almost identical in footprint, with it tapering off a little bit over there on the blade side. Overall, I mean, I think the Shaman's a really great knife. I think it would be perfect in my eyes if it had more cutting surface and less of the finger choil or finger guard or whatever you want to call that choke up position. I know it's the finger choil. I don't think it needs it. I think if they had gotten rid of that, if they just brought this up so that your finger actually stops here, and that they actually just gave you the sharpening choil and brought the blade steel or the cutting surface back to about here, I think this would be the most perfect knife out there on the market, in my opinion. That's my final thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments. I know a lot of people like the Shaman. A lot of people are probably not going to agree with my opinion, but it is just my opinion, my thoughts on how I'm handling the knife and how I'm using it. Again, I'm not saying that it's not good. I just think it would have been perfect if it would have had those little itty bitty differences. I appreciate you tuning in today. If you enjoyed the video, think about leaving a like for me. It helps me out on YouTube. Everybody that's been supporting, I really appreciate you guys. It's been awesome. I am so grateful, and I'll continue to bring you the content. Hope you all have a fantastic week, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, peace.